So in this video, we're going to be talking all about loot, highlighting some of my rarest items and favorite perks so far. As you know, I farmed the demo more than any sane person should, so I wanted to round up what are some of the best loot drops you should be looking for generally in Outriders. I managed to get 5 legendaries to drop so far, which are notoriously rare, and we're going to talk about them, which ones are good and which ones stick out more than the others, but also some of the non-legendaries as well, which can be just as powerful, if not more in some cases, but there's a lot of perks which might surprise you. Once again, a special thanks to Square Enix for kindly sponsoring this video. As you've seen recently, I've been playing this game a lot, so I do appreciate them wanting to sponsor some content on the channel. And if you want to check out the game, I've got a link at the top of the description for you. But with that being said, we've got a lot to talk about today. Don't forget to like the video for that algorithm. It's much appreciated. And let's get into it. So we've already talked about the builds and armor sets in this game, the kind of things you can do there. But in this video, we're going to be focusing all about weapons and some of the best ones to be keeping an eye out for. So talking about some legendaries, we're going to first talk about the Grim Marrow, which is a legendary machine gun that I got. You might have seen in some earlier footage. It's actually the very first legendary I got to drop, so I've used it for quite a lot and had the most experience with it. But this is a really nice weapon. Obviously, it's a machine gun, which is, I think, one of the better archetypes in the game, obviously, because of a massive magazine. Overall, haven't seen too much of a crazy difference between using one of the more standard auto rifles and using something like this. There isn't a massive penalty in movement or reload speed. It just seems kind of like a win-win. Combining this with something like a shotgun, I find is one of my favorite combos, but this one in particular is obviously very good with any of the higher DPS skills like twisted rounds or blighted rounds, volcanic rounds with the Pyromancer. As far as its perks, it's got the Singularity 3 mod, which is nice, and this is going to make an anomaly when you get certain killing shots. It doesn't proc too often. It's actually quite rare, especially now. Might get buffed in the future, but when you kill things, there's a chance you might get this small bubble to spawn, and that's going to deal 458 damage in a 6.5 meter radius, which is a decent little explosion. It's like a nice grenade or a mine. If you just kind of leave it alone, it'll explode naturally, but you can also shoot it to detonate it early if you want to. But it's a decent perk, but in my experience, not all too noticeable, especially with the spawn rate, but it might get improved at some point in the future. But as of now, it isn't the most noticeable. The other perk, though, is only a tier 2, but I found this is way more noticeable and one of the better perks I've found in the game. And this is improved stiffening, which inflicts slow on enemies you shoot. Now, it's got a pretty quick cooldown. Generally, you can just tap fire any enemy and it's going to instantly put them in that slow animation, which is very handy. It definitely reminds me a lot of the Airy Master shotgun, which has definitely been dubbed as one of the favorites of all the legendaries so far. It's got a lot of praise. Many think it's one of the best legendaries in the game right now, and this is obviously going to immobilize enemies and stun them so you can do more damage. And what this one does in the Grim Marrow, there's an enemy that's giving you a lot of trouble, you can just pop 1 or 2 shots into them and they're basically stunned for a good few seconds. And the cooldown, like I said, is pretty generous. It gives you a lot of time to basically switch weapons, reload, or do anything else while the enemies are just stunned. Now, I do like this weapon so much, the game thought I should have 2 of them, so it actually gave me another one on my Devastator, which was the second drop I ever got. So I got 2 duplicates, but on different characters. But I definitely prefer this a lot more on the Trickster, and I'm going to try it as well on the Techno character as well for those Blighted Rounds build, the one that I showed off in my previous video. So you'll definitely want to move these around your characters and find the best build where it really fits in, because some characters it works better than others. Now, of course, with duplicates, there are going to be differences that are randomly rolled, and those are the passives. Obviously, the perks and the main stats are the same, but those passive traits are going to be different for each one. You can also see that little symbol there means that that is what you're going to get shards for if you dismantle it, which is going to go into that passive. You can then level up. So that's kind of deeper into the crafting system. But both of these are very similar. If you compare the two, they've both got 11.9% crit damage and they've both got 6% close range damage. But the skills at Life Leech is the slight difference. And the one on my Devastator's got 1%, whereas the Trickster is 1.17. So very slight differences. But in the end game, these are going to be the things people grind for to really min-max and get their perfect builds and distributions the way they want them. Now, moving on to the next one, this is the Amber Vault, and this is a legendary double gun, which, as you can see, has got 2 little magazines down there and also 2 barrels. That's how double guns are supposed to work in this game. It's more of a visual thing. As far as the ammo count, it doesn't actually fire 2 bullets at once. It's counted as 1, but I think technically it's firing 2, and that's how the damage is supposed to work. Now, this one is going to come with the perks Killing Spree 3, and this one means that killing shots increase the damage by 30% for 30 seconds, and you can stack it multiple times, and then it's going to slowly wear off over time. But This at first I didn't take too much notice of because it is quite a passive perk. It just works in the background. You don't really notice it, but of course there's a subtle damage buff that's just going to always apply, which is very nice to have. And of course it's going to come in most handy if you're taking out some of the low tier ads and mobs and then working your way around the battlefield, and that damage is going to apply to when you take out the more tanky enemies as well. So it's one of the more tactical buffs, but I really like anything that just works passively. You don't have to think about it, and it's just a very strong DPS weapon overall. So very, very strong perk. And the other one is probably the more noticeable and interesting one, but it's a little bit more finicky and it depends what build you're running. This is Brain Ether 2, and it means critical shots do not consume ammo, which is very cool. So as long as you're landing those headshots, it will not consume any ammo and you can just keep on firing like these bosses. You can see it just doesn't go down at all. So that's gonna be very nice for those situations. But overall, I don't think it's as crazily potent as the Killing Spree perk, because generally with this weapon, you're not going to be super accurate. Obviously in third person, when there's a lot going on, it can be quite difficult to land perfect headshots, and these enemies are constantly moving around. So it's nice to have in the background. Obviously, if you can try to be accurate, you can, but as well, generally you aren't going for crazy all-out DPS on this gun. So in general, it just means that you have to reload a little bit less if you're trying to be accurate, but it does stack nicely again with the Killing Spree. If you try and kill some of the low tier mobs and then you got the damage buff and then go and put all those rounds into a boss, it can be a lot more helpful. But for the most part, it's not the most precise gun in the world. Now, this is also a legendary that I did get duplicates of. So I got one firstly on my Technomancer. Actually, funny enough, I got this on World Tier 4 when I wasn't even trying and I wasn't even recording either. I was just leveling up my character. And funny enough, on the Captain Farm mission, I just got one to drop randomly. But that's why I got this one at level 228 on this character. But I got a secondary one on my Devastator once again, and this one came at 346. But look at the differences. My Devastator's one has the higher armor piercing and also the shard icon on that one, whereas the Techno's has a higher healing, and they both have the same 6.5% at close range damage. And that's also where the Techno has the shard icon. So you can see the differences there again in what duplicates look like. Now, moving on to the next one, this is the Iceberg, which is a legendary bolt action rifle. And this, as you can see, is very much based around freezing and ice abilities. So this one comes with the Winter Blast 3 perk, meaning that crit shots are going to create an icy blast that makes enemies freeze around them in a 4-meter radius. And the next one ties into it, which is Icebreaker 2. And that means when you kill a frozen enemy, it's going to do a little icy explosion with 229 damage. Now, in my experience, this is a little bit of a strange one because mainly the Winter Blast perk doesn't seem to activate that often, and it isn't off all crit shots. It isn't just simply getting any headshot on an enemy that's alive is going to do it. I think this is a weapon perfect for the Technomancer class. Of course, that is based a lot around freezing and has the turret, so you can freeze enemies a lot more easy, and this perk will activate without even needing to get any of those crit shots. So I think this one definitely depends heavily on your build and essentially what you're running. This isn't just one you can chuck on any old character and have it be really effective. On my Devastator, it hardly does anything, and the Winter Blast does not activate very often, and I could easily see this getting some sort of buff to increase the chance, because right now it doesn't seem too potent, especially for a legendary weapon. I've seen a lot of people say similar things. Now, as much as I've talked about legendaries, they definitely are not the be-all end-all in this game. Some of my favorites overall have been blues. I mean, at the end of the day, perks are the most important things here. It's just that legendaries drop the fixed ones and also at higher tiers, but you can of course swap them around to your liking with crafting, and the legendaries are very much just cosmetic. The perks are the most important part of the loot system. So as you're leveling up, definitely keep a lookout for some of these blues, and some of them are way more potent, I've found, than even legendaries. One of my favorites overall would have to be Essence Thief, and this means that shots are going to regenerate some of your health, which obviously can be massively helpful. It's quite a rare perk, but if you can get this, especially I found on pump action shotguns, it is very, very nice. So in pretty much any situation, I've been able to just tank so much damage just by constantly landing shots. And with pump actions in particular, you can deal more damage and then get more health back than the damage is done to you. So you can just constantly have more health, even though you're getting destroyed by these captains and high tier enemies. I've tried out on some of the assault rifles and LMGs, but it doesn't seem to give you back as much health, whereas shotguns, because there's a massive chunk, it just gives you a huge chunk of health back. So it's a really nice perk, probably my favorite overall in the game so far. And as far as some of the status effect ones, some of my favorites would be the toxic and burn ones. Those do great, of course, tick damage over time. They're very, very effective. And also the freeze rounds. I've had this very rarely drop, but I've got this pump shotgun, and with freezing rounds on it, it's really nice to be able to just stop enemies dead, and you have way more time to just precisely line up your shots. So freezing rounds I found are some of my favorites, as well as toxic and burn. And now, even aside from the weapon perks, probably my favorite overall weapon frame will be the automatic shotgun slug VAR. This thing is a shredding machine and probably the highest DPS in the game. This thing just shreds anything in front of you, and especially when you combine it with some of those perks like health regeneration. One of these is pretty much always on one of my characters, and especially for melting bosses and farming, it's always my go-to over even the legendaries, which do have some powerful perks, but you just can't beat some of the raw DPS of these automatic shotguns. So a whole lot of loot talk. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. And as always, like ratings are greatly appreciated if you want to support the video. While you're down there, drop your comments with some of your favorite loot and perks and what legendaries you've got so far. If you want to learn more about Outriders, there is a link at the top of the description you can go check out. But as always, I massively appreciate you for watching this video and especially making it this far. And I'll see you guys in the next video.